On my way here, I was thinking, what do I even say in these remarks? Because I kept on asking Soji, am I expected to give a speech or am I expected to give remarks? And he said, just give remarks. So for me, I think I'll share a bit of my journey over the past 1 year. For the past, I think, 4 or 5 years, I took a sabbatical for what was my core profession, telecoms, both from the OEM space and the operator space outside Nigeria. But I never really appreciated the importance of co-location partners, especially in an environment like Nigeria. So luckily, I'm somebody who is very, I wouldn't say slow to move, but I like to understand what is going on before I swing my axe, so to say. When I first joined, there was a lot of call for blood. Find them, do this, do that. Like, no, hold on, let me understand what's going on. And as we slowly unraveled the value chain, I came to understand how critical the co-location sector is. And it was very simple. I was like, okay, they provide the power. If there's no power, the MNOs cannot power their equipment. At first, I thought some of these CEOs were making excuses. But I think when we looked at it in depth, we kind of realized, okay, there's actually a very, very clear correlation, and one that is almost, so you don't even have to think about it to make that connection. Now, I think what I would say subsequently is something that I think I've really appreciated from the industry over the past 1 year, is collaboration. And Soji, thank you for using the words fair in handling your difficult situation. But I think it's more about compromise. And I think one thing I'd have to salute you for, and even for the rest of the industry, is that patience and understanding as we navigate these difficult terrains. I mean, whether it is contractual disputes, matters of competition, or the general sustainability of the industry. I think on whatever matter it has been, I have seen a level of maturity that I had never even expected I would see within or the way people perceive Nigerians when it comes to business and the likes. So I think just to round up, I would say it's a very important category of licensee for us, that co-location sector. I think ATC is the number 2, I believe, in that sector. And I think over the past 1 year, I've seen them consistently, strive to improve and maintain their performance despite the challenging operating environment. And not only that, I think their credibility when it comes to sustainability. I think they're the one co-location partner that has invested a lot in sustainable energy solutions. It's almost like you had a crystal ball to see what lay ahead in Nigeria when it comes to power. Now, double benefits, of course, you get the performance and we get the green credential, because I remember one of the first people I met when I joined was, I won't mention names, was an advocacy group that were concerned about the amount of emissions that was coming from our sectors. And they quoted a stat that we have more generators than any sector in Nigeria. I was like, wow. But it was also then pleasing to hear that the likes of ATC have invested in green technology, which not only is cutting emissions, but whether by chance or accident, but their performance, we also see a correlation between their performance against others that have not invested as much in green technology. So I just want to say thank you for leading the way. We'll be asking for more. And I think there's no other way to give back to the country by doing what we do. Because today the importance of digital connectivity cannot be overemphasized. Whether somebody is in the rural area, whether you say they are unbanked, they are underbanked, everybody relies on digital connectivity. So we have a lot of responsibility on our shoulders. And the only way we can achieve it and reach the heights that the president, through his renewed hope agenda, and the minister, through his strategic blueprint, wants us to achieve, is by continuing to work together and collaborate. So ladies and gentlemen, I promise I'll keep it short, so thank you very much once again. And by the way, congratulations formally on the big stage as being the first CEO, Nigerian CEO of ATC. Thank you very much.
The 8,000th tower is particularly special to us at ATC because it represents a commitment to perseverance, to tenacity and teamwork. We aggressively pursued a build program that many thought would be almost impossible. To be able to sit back now and look at our points of presence almost doubling in the last 4 to 5 years is truly a testament to what we can do when we come together.
It's a landmark achievement for ATC to get to 8,000, given the fact that we started with just about 4,500 sites about 8 years ago when we came into Nigeria. It's worth celebrating that we've gotten to 8,000 sites. We've built over 3,500 sites since inception. The different parts of this project, you see, we have the civil part and we have the electrical part. The civil parts are comprised of the foundation, the tower, the setting of the tower, the retaining walls, the palisade, and the likes. Where we talk of the power section, which has to do with what is going to power the site.
Within a month, we achieved this site that you are seeing standing.
And while doing that, we do it without creating pollution.
This is a green site. It's a representation of where ATC is going with respect to building sites with low carbon footprints.
When you see ATC, you know it's a brand. You can't go to a fair without noticing the site. You can't go to a fair without looking at your left and say, who has that site? And they know that it can only be ATC.
ATC Nigeria is a very environment-friendly site. We're looking to improve the lives of the citizens wherever we're building our sites. We also want to make sure that it's in a safe space.
This 8,000 tower is a definition of resilience. It's bringing together world-class team, best-in-class team. I can tell you from start to finish, this is a collaboration of different functional units at ATC in Nigeria. It's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of meetings. It's a lot of engagement, starting from engagement with the community, engagement with security, and most important, quality. We're on a 100-year journey as a company, at least, of services that are required in Nigeria. I really do feel privileged to be able to play a role in laying the foundation for those 100 years. I see ATC in the more short term, in the next 5 to 10 years, easily doubling or tripling the points of presence, doing business ethically, doing business the right way, trying to improve a lot of the communities that we serve, and investing as much as possible in sustainable solutions.
We are here standing in front of the 8,000th site. And it's very memorable because this is the 8th year of operation of ATC Nigeria. And as such, we are here, we actually call it 8 for 8. So this is ATC Nigeria's 8,000th site in its 8th year of operation in Nigeria. We are here to commission LG 4790 to the benefit of mankind, and to service to the people of this community.
Thank you very much, and thank you again, Dr. Maida, for your special remarks. We appreciate you again being here. Before we move to our next speaker for this evening, I'd like to recognize a couple more people. I understand that the president of ATCON is being represented by Mr. Chidi Ibisi. So in his absence, we acknowledge him, Mr. Izuagbe Tony, and thank you, Mr. Chidi Ibisi, for being here. Thank you. Can we give him a round of applause? Also like to recognize the presence of the Executive Director of the MTN Nigeria Foundation, Mrs. Odun Soya. I believe she's here. Thank you for being here. Okay, I'm going to move very quickly now to our next speaker, who is a captain of industry. If you don't know him, where have you been? In the person of Mr. Bolaji Balogun, who is now the Chief Executive Officer of Chapel Hill Denham. He has over 35 years of experience in investment banking, investing, and mobile telecommunications. Chapel Hill Denham is Nigeria's leading investment bank and sustainable finance leader, and the leading alternatives asset manager focused on area accretive to Nigeria and Africa's development, namely infrastructure, renewables, real estate, venture, gender, and youth. He has spent over 10 years within FCMB Group. He spent over 10 years until January of 2001, when he left to become the co-founder and director of Nigeria's first mobile network, Econet Wireless Nigeria, which is now Airtel Nigeria. He led the capital raising and license bid auction for Econet Wireless Nigeria mobile license. The US $1.6 billion sale of Econet Wireless to Celtel in 2005 remains Nigeria's single largest successfully exited private investment. He left mobile telecommunications and founded Chapel Hill Denham in 2005. He is a board member of the United Nations Global Compact. He is the chairman of Unilever Nigeria PLC and co-chair of the Private Sector Advisory Group. He is the chairman of Endeavor Nigeria and a director of Trust Fund Pensions, one of Nigeria's pension fund managers, largest pension fund managers. He was immediate past chairman of Lafarge Africa PLC, NACO FTZ Limited, and a former director of Naho Aviance PLC and NASD PLC. He was appointed to the Johannesburg Stock Exchange Africa Advisory Board in 2009 in September. He's an economics honors graduate of the London School of Economics and is the president of LSC Nigeria Alumni Association. Ladies and gentlemen, with a very warm round of applause, please welcome our keynote speaker for this evening, Mr. Bolaji Balogun.
Thank you very much, Adirunke. I hate long introductions, and the most important way I like to be introduced is Liverpool supporter, father of 5 children, still happily married. Thank you all very much, and really delighted. Thank you, Soji and Madam Chairman of ATC, for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to share a few words, and really at a most auspicious time in Nigeria's telecom sector. Really delighted to see you, Mr. Regulator, and Dr. Maida and myself had a most enjoyable time together on a flight that we shared shortly after his appointment, and I don't think that we've had the benefit of catching up since that day. But really, really excited about this sector. And I'm delighted that, you are present today along with your colleague Rimini, and I hope that the message of hope which, I will share is something which each and every one of us. Do you have my slides, or should I try to do this without? Okay, I'll speak without the slides. So prior to 2001, what we had in Nigeria was a telecoms industry which was dominated by Nitel. And if you didn't live in Nigeria at that time, you'd find it hard to believe that there were people who lived in Nigeria who'd never ever heard a telephone ring. In December of 2001, we had 460,000 phone lines in the country. Nitel was the dominant operator for absolutely everything that you required. If you happen to be, like some of us, a student abroad, it was not uncommon if your parents' phone at home, if they were lucky to have a telephone working, was not working, and the way that they reached you in school was by going down to the nearest, Nitel operation to go and use a phone box at Nitel. And if you've ever used one of those phone boxes at Nitel, one of the things you would all have been amazed about is that Nigerians have never been patient people, because just as you finally get through to the number that you're trying to reach, they're trying to get you, off the phone box. And that was the history that we lived. Roll forward 20 years later, and none of us could call what the industry has become. And this is really the message that I want to share about the next 20 years of this industry, and why investment is critical, and why each and every one of us as partners and collaborators in this ecosystem are going to need to think and rethink and reimagine that the way that we interact together and work with each other. Post the liberalization of the sector, we ended up essentially with this sector now dominated by large mobile telecoms operators. At some point after the first 3 or 4 years, it became pretty clear that one of the ways in which you could extend capital across the sector and extend capacity was really through the business of co-location. And Carl will remember, we sat in Econet Wireless in those days. The only reason that I think we gave the first co-location contract that we did to an ATC competitor, and I will try not to mention their name in the room, was essentially because, Motorola had turned up with a vendor financing package for us. We needed to accept that vendor financing package because pretty much after we paid for our mobile license in January 2001, we had no money left. On another day when I have a little more time to speak, I'd love to tell the story of how we paid for the first switch, but that's a long story for another night. So Motorola turned up with this package. None of us were really convinced about Motorola at the time. And what it was fundamentally was that, we were all bred on Ericsson mobile networks, and Ericsson was the Rolls-Royce mobile supplier. Carl started his life in those days, in Ericsson before he came to join us, on this side. And we were pretty clear in our minds that if we're going to take risk on Motorola, we wanted to do it not in the midst of the heat. And the heat in those days was the network in Lagos, the network in Abuja, and the growing network in Port Harcourt. We had very little coverage in the southeast, so we decided to take a risk on Motorola, and Motorola came along with a couple of outsourced turnkey site builders they were in those days. And that was the origins of the co-location industry that today is now fundamental to the sector. And that concept of outsourcing is something that we're going to see more and more happen. And across the world, if we look at what's happening in mobile networks everywhere else in the world, almost everything has been outsourced other than the core network. And there are even a couple of models internationally where the core network is now outsourced. So the reality of the sector is that co-location was the beginnings of outsourcing, but outsourcing is going to be an increasing phenomenon that we see across the sector. 20 years ago, when you looked at revenues in telecoms across the world, the bulk of the revenues, basically came from voice and data. Move forward 20 years to today, and Nigeria is very much, following that same trend. What you will find today is that the value chain is much more than voice and data. And increasingly, you are finding that digital services, user interface, infrastructure are becoming much larger pieces of that pie. And the more that you democratize connectivity and telecoms access in a market like Nigeria, the more that this will become significant. Whether we like it or not, over the next decade and over the next 20 years, much more than the $70 billion that's been invested in this sector over the last 25 years will need to be invested here. When I heard Soji talking about ATC investing $1 billion, over the next 10 years, I figured I needed to get on a plane with him and go to Boston to go and speak to his bosses, because quite frankly, they have no idea of what is coming down the road, ahead of the business and the sector here. Notwithstanding, fantastic. Thank you. Do I have a, okay, do you have a flicker or something that I can use? Thank you very much. Thank you. Great. So I talked about the origins of the industry and how we got to where we are today. So if you look across the world, 20 years ago, what you would see is a model that looked exactly like this, where connectivity was essentially the biggest part of the pie, and most of the money was being made around voice and data. Move forward till today, and you will see connectivity still significant, but digital services, particularly e-commerce, the largest piece of the pie, infrastructure growing, and user interfaces also growing. While there's been a lot of investments made in Nigerian telecoms and across a variety of sectors, there's still quite a bit of work that remains to be done. And this work remains around a number of significant areas. The first item is that we still do not have complete or universal coverage in Nigeria today. Service quality is substantially better than in the early years, but I never envisaged that 20 plus years after we launched these networks, service quality would be where it is today. We're still grappling with broadband, and broadband is really, really fundamental to this country's future. We have absolutely no chance of educating a generation of Nigerians without broadband. We have absolutely no chance of securing this country properly without broadband. We have absolutely no chance of even building, a good healthcare system without, making broadband cheaper and more affordable to all Nigerians. And when you look across the sector today, thank you, perfect, I can walk around. And when you look around the sector today, one of the key issues that everyone is talking about is the sector's significant carbon footprint. At some point, until about a year and a half ago, I was invested in a much smaller tower operator which we bought and which we started to grow. And one of the reasons that I very quickly got out of it was contending with the carbon footprint of that business. In one part of my business, I'm Nigeria's largest investor in sustainable infrastructure and low carbon infrastructure. In a second part, I can't be, living with a business that has such a strong carbon footprint. So we realized that we couldn't be speaking with, two different sides of our mouth. We sold the business, and that's something which, by and large, ATC apart. the industry has not really succeeded in reducing its carbon footprint. The other more worrisome thing for me is that if you look across the industry today, we haven't really developed industry talent in a significant way. And every single operation that is significant is still led by that first generation, the generation of operators immediately in the first 5 to 7 years post-GSM licensing in 2001. And if we don't deal with our talent, we're really not preparing for the scale of the industry that's to come. And let me talk about that scale. I think for us, from regulator, from government, down to all of the operators, we really need to be preparing for the impact of very, very significant scale in the sector. And I'll speak to that. I truly believe that demography is destiny. And Nigeria is simply traveling a journey with China 30-odd years ago. India, over the last 20 years, have traveled before us. The 200 million people who live in this country, over the next 25 years, will become somewhere around 480, 490 million people. At that point in time, you would expect two things to happen. The first of those, which is already being projected by Goldman Sachs, is that Nigeria's economy will become the 5th largest economy by around 2075. But even if the economy doesn't grow that fast, almost certainly one thing will happen. Sometime after the end of the next 10 years, we will become the 3rd largest market for telephony and connectivity in the world. And if that is the market that we're going to become, it requires each and every one of us in the ecosystem to start architecting for that. What is the end game? And the end game, quite frankly, is a scenario where all Nigerians are interacting first and foremost with the government on a digital basis. And this can happen so quickly and much faster than you and I are prepared for. If you were to connect all of the networks of data that we have today, BVNs to NINs to the mobile subscriber network, almost certainly you're going to end up with a scenario where all Nigerians on the back of something that has a chip on it effectively have a digital footprint and you can interact with them. And that's going to require a lot of bandwidth and a lot of capacity. And everything that you think about, the next generation from CNG vehicles will be electric vehicles and connected cars. And all of these things are going to put pressure. So everything that you think about is going to be around this platform, connectivity platforms and connectivity as a service. And this is really where this sector is moving towards. And this is, the requirements for scale around this are going to be quite substantial. The entire ecosystem has a big opportunity, but I truly feel this needs to be led by the regulator and supported by the large operators. And 3 things or 4 things, we must take as a given. The first of those is that at some point, the only chance this country has to develop and to catch up with development very quickly, right, is basically through technology. And that's going to require that every Nigerian begins to interact at the very minimum with the government, if not for all basic services, digitally. Whether we like it or not, the increasing prevalence of artificial intelligence in a number of areas of our business lives, and already today, AI is already being used in financial services, in fintech in this country, and in a number of other areas, will require increased bandwidth. But more than that, it will require very substantial power as well. And whether we like it or not, that means that we have to make substantially larger investments over the next 10, 15 years in the sector, and probably even larger investments than all of the investments that have been made over the last 20, 25 years. And if people are going to make an investment, they need to be able to get a return. So whether we like it or not, without being seen to be advocating for the sector, and nobody sent me to do this, we are all going to have to sit down, and we are all going to have that conversation around tariffing sooner rather than later, because unless investors have the ability to get a return, the capital will go to other places. As simple as that. But in return, all of the operators in the market, and I will not ask a regulator to do something and not ask the regulated also what they're going to bring to the table. All of the regulators in the market are going to have to change their way and are going to have to change their game. And whether you like it or not, if a market is going to become the third largest telephony market in this country, we cannot continue to increase everything. To import everything. We are all going to have to do much more with all of our suppliers to localize the value chain of this business. And the reality of it is that if I look back 24 years from January 2001, one of the things that I'm saddest about is that till today we don't produce a handset in this country. I remember sitting, and Carl might remember some of those conversations, pulling all the OEMs into a room and saying, we want a $35 handset. And they all laughed at us when we did so in October, November of 2001. It took one small French company, not so small today, Sagem, basically to break ranks. And Sagem turned up and said, we can do it at $39.50. And then a Chinese company called ZTE turned up after them, and $39.50 became $37. And that's one of the reasons today why 220 million people, right, have access, to connectivity in this country. The second thing that we must do is that if you're not generating dollars, you must minimize foreign exchange financing. Every single market in the world that has significantly invested in its infrastructure since the end of the Second World War, there is one commonality. The currency of their debt, whether they produce infrastructure assets or not, is local currency. You can invest equity in any currency, but the currency of their debt, the one commonality, is local currency. And if we don't significantly minimize foreign currency exposure on balance sheets, you are just creating indigestion. There is no point, in the last 30 years of this country where it has been cheaper to finance in dollars. To all the CFOs, and I spend my life in front of CFOs, to all the CFOs of companies, big, small, right, who believe so, I can provide you 25 years of evidence in this country that you might get away with it for short periods, but you would never have gotten away for it for more than 3.5 to 5 years in a row. You would always end up in a point of indigestion. And it's just economics theory. It's something called inflation differential. The third element is we must work with the private sector to improve power generation. We cannot continue to run these networks without us doing something significant around utility scale power in the country. The fifth lesson for me that I must sort of leave with everyone is that all these companies need to do much more to utilize local capital markets. And everywhere in the world, the biggest infrastructure businesses are financed through capital markets. So building a big infrastructure business that doesn't use the capital markets is a bit of a misnomer. And finally, we all must develop a plan for talent development. And the skills that the sector requires today are not the skills that will be required for that future that I've described. And that future isn't 10 years away. It's not 7 years away. It might be as near term as 5, 6 years away from us. I've talked about power today, and the reality of Nigeria is that you have 3 sectors today where there's power requirements alone require that something fundamentally must change around our power sector, and very, very quickly. And we cannot continue to exist in a scenario where for large businesses, power is the biggest, part of their OPEX, or the biggest part, in some instances, of their CAPEX after their core infrastructure. I'd like to talk briefly about capital markets. And 2 decades ago, if you looked at Nigeria's infrastructure capital markets, the only component was an issuer like Lagos State using the markets regularly, raising capital to build roads, build all sorts of other infrastructure. But when you look today, the reality is that a Lagos State, irrespective of its continued large use of the markets, is a small fraction of that market. And today you have the equity of a number of companies from MTN and Airtel quoted on the stock exchange now. You have the bonds, whether euro bonds of people like IHS or local currency bonds of MTN in the domestic capital markets. You have green bonds, every sukuk that's been issued by the federal government of Nigeria, including the one issued to build this road that goes down Bar Beach to bring you here, right, is an infrastructure bond. And today, the infrastructure markets are alive and healthy, and a lot of money can be raised by any issuer interested in Nigeria. And what's the big driver of this? More than just under 20 years ago, Nigeria wrote some really beautiful pensions legislation. And that pensions legislation today has created a sector which basically must only invest in Nigeria. So there's all that capital that's out there. And that capital today is over 20 trillion naira, and it's looking for a home. It invests primarily in the government, but it wants to invest in other things. And these are the biggest buyers of bonds normally in Nigeria. Our pension funds, local fund managers, the largest Nigerian families, and other financial institutions. What you have today is a pension sector that's over 21 trillion naira and growing by nearly 20% annually. And the opportunity for a company that wants to use it is very available, and today you can finance significant amounts in the capital markets. Just to give you some perspective, total issuance in the capital markets this year alone is north of 4 trillion naira. So even if you put that into US dollars, it's significant, yeah? So these are not small markets by any means. And if Carl will permit me, I want to use MTN as a quick case study. MTN basically was a company where we all knocked on the door for many, many years to try to get MTN to think about capital markets. And at some point in 2019, MTN listened. The first thing they did was to list their company on the stock exchange. Very shortly afterwards, they decided to dip their toe in, right? And they got a rating, and they issued their first commercial paper. I think they themselves were surprised. The markets gave them 2 times what they were looking for. We went out to try and price 100 billion naira CP for MTN. The order book when we closed that deal was more than 200 billion. And this was over a 5-day period. That encouraged MTN. They issued shortly afterwards their first bond. Today, MTN has issued out to 10 years in local currency. And what has happened through that process is that it's reduced its dependency on bank credit, and if you have your Naira, to a large extent, you also have the ability to get your dollars when dollars are available. And the MTN example is an incredible story, but today, MTN, through its regular activity in the capital markets, now has a AAA rating in Naira, which is equivalent essentially to the sovereign in Naira. When you look at the balance sheets of the largest operators in Nigeria, whether it's Airtel, it's IHS, it's ATC, absolutely every single one of those operators needs to be using the capital markets for their financing. And what MTN has become is a frequent and disciplined user of the capital markets. And I can tell you today that if MTN wakes up and they say, we want to raise 200 or we want to raise 250 billion, one pop, it's 5 to 7 days of work, will deliver that money. And that happens because of a track that they built in the market. So the more you use the markets, the more that the markets are supportive of what you want to do. So this opportunity exists, and there are many corporates in Nigeria who are using the markets in one way or the other. Some using it on the equity side, some using it on the debt side. But if you're significant in this country and you're not using the markets, you're missing a trick somewhat. So let me round up and just talk about the incredible role that I believe the government, and Mr. Regulator, you represent the government here today, can play in enabling investments in the sector. I've talked about the specific issues around MNO tariffs and other tariffs, but I also want to talk about something that we can do with tariffs and in particular duties to try and encourage local manufacturing and local assembly of elements of the value chain for this sector. Whether we like it or not, for the scale of sector that we're going to become, if we do not try to encourage the value chain to become somewhat localized, we will continue, right, basically to be put under pressure around FX by this sector, which is not necessary. We will continue also to be exporting jobs and exporting value added to other countries when it is Nigerians who are speaking or utilizing data on the networks. Government can play, I think, a very positive role there. There's a second role which the government can play, which is if anybody in that value chain turns up with a significant business, and this is why I'm also delighted to see my brother Shegun. Aside from his Airtel Foundation role, he's now chairman of our sovereign investment fund, the NSIA. And again, without trying to put anyone under pressure, NSIA and MOFI essentially must be really focused on how they can be co-investment partners in the value chain of this sector. If somebody turns up today, whether it's towers for the co-location businesses, or somebody wants to be assembling the electricals, and they're tried, tested, proven in another part of the world, this is the sort of investment that our NSIA should be making. Because these investments will generate jobs here, they will localize value chains, and import substitution is one of the few ways in which we're going to transform this economy. The next element that's important is that everybody in this sector must be encouraged to be very, very transparent around their numbers. And whether you're listed or you're not listed, if you're in this sector, you're mission critical, and therefore people need to be encouraged to publish their financial performance. And by encouraging that, you're also encouraging a lot more knowledge about the sector And when there's knowledge about a sector, capital follows it. We need to think about the incentives we create for those companies that decide to come out to public markets. Because if we don't incentivize them for doing so, large businesses being built in this sector don't want to be anywhere near the markets. But if we create, for example, differential taxes for listed companies in these sectors, it will make a significant difference. And then I think we all owe it to ourselves that every single company in this country which wins a license for a regulated function or some kind of concession needs to be listed on a Nigerian exchange. And these are all things which help to build that ecosystem and help to scale investments to be ready for that market of the future. I hope I didn't take too much of your time. Thank you very, very much for giving me a chance to say these few words.
Another warm round of applause for Mr. Bolaji Balogun, CEO, Chapel Hill Denim, Captain of Industry. Thank you so much, sir, for that very rich presentation. Can we give him another warm round of applause? It's one of those things where you want to be like, sir, can you please share your slides? Because there's so much more to check out on his slides. Thank you so much, sir, and to catch up on and to read on even in more depth. I want to let you know that we have a panel discussion coming up shortly, and we're going to use technology for the Q&A session. So we will have a QR code on the screen intermittently during the panel discussion. If you have any questions at all or comments that you'd like to share by the time we get to the end of the panel discussion, please scan the QR code and you can send in your questions. Also, before we move to our panel discussion, I'd like to warmly recognize someone that is very dear to us at ATC Nigeria. I'm speaking of the chairman of our board. There she is, Professor Enase Okonedo. Can we give her a warm round of applause? And she was here bright and early. Thank you for being here, as always, to support us. So as I mentioned, during our panel discussion, we will have a QR code. Please use the QR code, send in your comments, questions, just to make things a little quicker. And of course, we're talking about advancing connectivity. Let's use some technology in what we're doing today as well. We do have some trivia coming up. We want to test your knowledge of the industry, so stay tuned for that as well. At this time, like I said, we're going to move to our panel discussion. This first panel will set the tone for the second one. And this one is really about, when we think about advancing connectivity, what is shaping the future of connectivity? What are the trends? What's the innovation? What's the kind of technology that we need to be thinking about as we look ahead in our industry? And we'll be looking at that on this panel discussion. And to guide us in that discussion, I'm going to call on my colleague, Caro Akaba, Key Account Director at ATC Nigeria, and she will introduce our panelists. Please give her a warm round of applause as she comes.
Thank you, Aderonke. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Are you excited to be here? I am. Thank you very much. So welcome to our panel discussion on shaping the future of connectivity. We'll consider trends, technology, and innovation for a sustainable digital economy. In a world where digital transformation is not just a trend, but a necessity, our conversation today will delve into the pivotal role of connectivity in driving sustainable economic growth. As we navigate the complexities of this digital age, we'll explore cutting-edge technologies, emerging trends, and innovative solutions redefining our connectivity landscape. So let's now welcome our distinguished panelists. Our distinguished panelists bring a wealth of knowledge and experience from various sectors. Together, we'll uncover the advancements in connectivity and also see how we can foster a more inclusive, efficient, and resilient digital economy. So I'll start off by welcoming Mr. Harmanpreet Dillon, the Chief Technology Officer of Airtel. Mr. Harmanpreet Dillon is a seasoned telecommunications leader with over 23 years' experience at top global companies like Vodafone, Nokia, Huawei, and Airtel. He has made significant contributions as CTO of Airtel's India's largest circle, leading 4G and 5G expansions, and pioneering new product lines and data centers. Currently as CTO of Airtel Nigeria, Mr. Dillon oversees technology, strategy, and operations, driving digital transformation and network modernization in Nigeria's dynamic telecom market. Welcome, Mr. Dillon. Next on our panel is Dr. Ayotunde Koka. Dr. Ayotunde Koka is a prominent figure in Africa's data center and digital infrastructure industry, currently serving as chairperson of the Africa Data Centers Association. He previously led RAC Center to significant acclaim and now serves as CEO of Open Access Data Centers. His distinguished career includes senior roles in management consulting, finance, energy, and the UK government, with numerous awards recognizing his contributions to technology and business leadership. He is a fellow of the Institute of Directors UK and an honorary senior member of the Chartered Institute of Bankers, Nigeria. He holds an MSc from Cranfield Institute of Technology and a PhD from ESCAE University. Welcome, Dr. Koka. Our next panelist is Dr. Folashade Dada. Dr. Folashade Dada is an attorney and the head of public policy for Anglophone West Africa at Meta Platforms. She collaborates with various stakeholders to address internet policy issues and ensure successful execution of connectivity initiatives and innovative solutions. Recognized as one of the 50 most valuable people in Nigeria's digital economy, Shade has a strong background. Shade has a strong background in broadband deployment and has worked with the Wireless Infrastructure Association in the US, FCC, and Microsoft. Shade earned her bachelor's in journalism from Georgia Southern University, her master's in telecommunications from Indiana University, and her Juris Doctorate from Indiana University Mora School of Law. Welcome, Dr. Shade. Next on the panel is Mr. Obafemi Banigbe, CEO of Nine Mobile. Mr. Obafemi Banigbe is a seasoned telecom expert and technology business leader with over 2 decades of international experience in wireless telecom, fintech, and market entry strategy. He has extensive C-suite experience, particularly in translating business objectives into effective strategies and driving operational efficiency in high growth and turnaround situations. He has also served in board advisory capacities, drawing highly diverse experience across the US and Africa. Currently, he is part of the executive management team at Nine Mobile, focusing on aligning the business plan with the brand's strategic direction. Welcome, Mr. Banigbe. And last but definitely not the least on the panel is Mr. Irabo Okogun. Oh, beautiful, you're here. I was looking out for you. Welcome, Mr. Irabo. Mr. Irabo Okogun is a seasoned project development and advisory expert with over 20 years of experience in project finance, energy infrastructure, and climate finance investments in Africa. He has held significant roles, including credit analyst at an energy desk, executive management at Transcorp PLC, and head of energy infrastructure advisory at KPMG Africa. His expertise spans utilities privatization, renewables, and raising over $2 billion in project finance with a strong focus on regulatory engagement and strategic advice for high-profile organizations such as the United Nations and the Nigerian government. Erabo holds an MBA from the University of Leicester, UK. Welcome once again to our distinguished panelists. So let's delve right into the conversation. Thank you once again. So we'll start. So in your view, what are the key trends currently shaping the future of technology?
I'll start with a great presentation that Bolaji Balogun did, and indicating some of the scale that we have coming. And there are quite a few things that point towards that scale. There's a supply side, which is the telecoms infrastructure, data centers. Everything sits in a data center somewhere, even the connectivity. And that's the footprint of data centers that we have here continues to increase significantly. We're just coming up to a tipping point in just the next 12 to 24 months, actually. And then the supply side, so the demand side, there's a lot we have with respect to continued broadband penetration of meaningful broadband. But the key critical thing is broadband adoption. And when we get that price point right with smart devices, and so on. And a lot around localization of data and the consumptive demand would just drive up the need for capacity significantly, right? If you look at certain things that are coming as well, the use of cloud, that's going to increase. And why? There's anecdotal evidence that would point to that. In Africa, particularly Nigeria, we have what I call the sachet economy. People earn today to spend tomorrow, and they'll buy little sachet, and they'll buy what is right. And that's what made mobile telephony incredibly successful. The innovation in being able to buy airtime for today and tomorrow, right? Now, the technology approach of that same sachet economy is cloud. You buy a little bit of what you need for your business, you access it through some smartphone or whatever, but mostly smartphone. And that creates a virtuous cycle of demand. So what that means, therefore, is you have demand on the networks, you need to provide more capacity, but significantly, we're also having data centers that are being built here at megawatts of size. There's one on the mainland, Rack Center, it's about 12 megawatts. The size of these data centers, they talk about them in megawatts because they consume power. Now, somehow we have to find the power, but that's something that's happening in parallel. I'm building one here with open access data centers in Lekki that's growing out to 24 megawatts, right? It's already in large scale. There's another one, Cassie, just next to where I am, that's going to around about 10, 12 megawatts, and Tele, I think, is building one as well of around about. So we've got megawatts of these things coming. And what that means is it localizes all that ability to compute, to deliver towards that demand. And that's going to put a significant amount of stress on networks that will demand increasing network capacity. So there's a whole chain of activity going on. Then people talk about AI, artificial intelligence. That's causing a significant amount of demand issue, actually, in Europe. About 2 to 3 years ago, I think, my view, Europe made the mistake of saying, oh, data centers as well, they consume a lot of power. We all know the net impact is actually positive in terms of reduced consumption with flying and all that kind of stuff. But we still have to make sure they're green and they use as little power as possible. But then they legislated against the availability of power and planning permissions weren't being given. Do you know what's happened? Therefore, you can't get enough contiguous megawatts of data center space to support the huge demand in AI. So for what it's worth, what I've been putting out there is that there will be capacity substitution. As we bring our megawatts in here over the next, pretty quickly actually, over the next 6 to 18, 20 months, then, we'll be saying, hey, you don't need to hold that African capacity in Europe, because it's going to take another 2 to 3 years before Europe recovers, because it just takes so much time to build this infrastructure. So what you scratch your head and think, well, let's get Africa's capacity to Africa. Lagos has a fantastic geophysical location in proximity and to Europe, and significant amount of network subsea capacity coming in. We've got Meta's to Africa coming in, going live in Q1 next year. We've already got Google's Equiano capacity that's been live for about a year now. In fact, both are bringing significant amount of network resilience to Nigeria. And then you have all these data centers. It means you would substitute that capacity here to make contiguous megawatts available in Europe. So that increases that demand here. It's good, they bring about significant amount of economic impact in the communities. So you get that, and AI demands a huge amount of data center capacity and network capacity and compute. That starts to eat up what's becoming available in Europe now. So you now push out to Africa as much as you can push out to Africa. South Africa is already building out lots of megawatts of capacity ahead of the curve. So you see a convergence in the amount of available capacity both here in Lagos and in Joburg. And so we have lots of data centers in South Africa as well. So that chain of events very, very quickly will mean that we will have a significant demand on network connectivity capacity, demand on broadband, and demand for access to the kind of end devices that enable broadband adoption, that enables this chain of capacity demand to happen. And it's right at our doorstep.
Thank you so much. You've given us a lot of valuable insights. You talked about edge computing, data coming closer to home, and also artificial intelligence.
Oh, yeah. You see data centers popping up around Nigeria.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Abuja, Port Harcourt, proper ones, not little server rooms, to deliver to that edge.
Cool, thank you. Maybe I should move now to Dr. Shade. Still talking about what we need. In your view, what infrastructure would we require given all of this? Dr. Tunde has talked about data centers coming up all over the country and huge ones, What other infrastructure do you think we would require?
Sure. I think Dr. Coco really, really answered this question. But that edge infrastructure is extremely key. With the advent of emerging technologies like AI, metaverse, having AR and VR technology, we're going to need more connectivity between end users, and that means having infrastructure that works closer to home. Since we already talked about edge, we talked about data centers, one of the things that also we need to consider in the mix is like spectrum as a piece of the infrastructure puzzle, and having unique spectrum models to enable sharing and use of spectrum across different licensees, but also unlicensed spectrum access for Wi-Fi use. And I know this is something that the NCC is looking at. You know, we've done a great job in Nigeria on the co-location front. That really is going to be helpful for us for emerging technologies and where the future is going as well, because you need to have parties working together, the operators, the telcos working together to not have duplicative infrastructure and to make the business case more palpable for going to underserved areas. I think that's a key. And while we're doing that, we're looking at how do you come up with infrastructure models that that basically encourage having service, network as a service, for instance, where you don't necessarily have an operator that's controlling the entire process. You might have an independent infrastructure provider that's providing, sharing, that's providing not just of the physical infrastructure, but of also on the spectrum side. And we've seen that model work in a number of countries, including here, but we should see more of that. The last thing I'll say about the infrastructure needs is also looking at how do we encourage new entrants, small businesses, small players that are going to come in and play a role in the infrastructure chain. There are different elements that are required to bring a network to life, to roll out in communities that need to roll out, and we need to be encouraging having more players that are in that space. One of the things that we look at as Meta is also how do you use data to help optimize those network build-outs. And we have a program that's around network insights, where we work with different infrastructure and infrastructure providers and operators to figure out where are the best places to build based on population information. And AI is actually playing a big role in how we are able to accomplish that now, looking at how you use these technologies to be able to map out an infrastructure build plan. Taking advantage of that type of innovation is also going to go a long way for increasing the connectivity that's necessary to support the emerging technologies that we're seeing.
Thank you. And I would believe you're supporting such small players whenever they come up. I'll see you in camera on that.
We try our best.
Okay. So talking about services, let's now move to one of our mobile network operators here. And the service in this instance is 5G. 5G is one of the key trends that 5G is already here in Nigeria, and is one of the key trends shaping the future of connectivity all over the world. So let me talk to the expert here, Mr. Harmanpreet. In your view, how do you think 5G will revolutionize the connectivity landscape? Maybe we'll start with that.
Yeah. 5G, as we all know, has key features like enhanced broadband, ultra-low latency, as well as massive machine types. So let me talk about some use cases that we see which is happening quickly in Nigeria and across the globe. I think the first one here is fixed wireless access, which is FWA. Now, we have challenges of rolling out fiber, and it takes a lot of time. So I think to really monetize 5G, this is the most important thing, that we are able to roll it out at a much quicker pace, unlike a fiber like broadband. People right now are going into remote ways of working, and they're looking for great experience while working remotely. I think FWA is enabling that. The entertainment industry, where I can say where there's a lot of demand for download, but not high demand of upload, like TV, watching entertainment. So fixed wireless access is one thing which 5G is enabling right now. I think this is the most basic requirement which is being encashed not only in Nigeria, but across the globe before we talk about any complex API applications. The second important aspect of it is from the security perspective. Now, we are currently in the world of spammers and scammers, and fintech as it is growing very fast. So when fintech is growing fast, authentication becomes a key. So 5G comes with features like authentication, silent authentication, which is actually helping us secure the network. It is also helping guaranteed bit rate to the users. If any user, any enterprise, or any user who's looking for a guaranteed bit rate, or maybe a differential experience, we can easily do on 5G. Apart from that, 5G will also enable, to sustainability. How? We have a lot of IoT devices, which can be connected to the energy industry, where it can monitor, precise temperatures, precise parameters, and AI on top of it can help define the energy efficiency. Whether I should be, for an example, whether I should be on a solar, or whether I should be on a battery, or I should be on a generator. So because of 5G, which gives us ultra low latency and very high speeds, really will revolutionize this. So we have just begun, right? And there are a lot of use cases where security, safety is concerned. We can really collaborate across industries and government for any national interest services, right? Because security today is very important, right? So these are a few of the use cases, and this is how 5G is really going to enable us, the end user experience. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Herman. Just thinking about the security bit and the scamming bit. Maybe we would catch up on that. But there are a lot of lessons, to be learned when it comes to the use of this technology. Let me now come to you, Mr. Femi Banigbe. In your view, what do you see connectivity like in the next decade? Our keynote speaker, Mr. Bolaji Balogun, spoke a lot on this, but we'd like to hear your perspective on this.
Thank you very much. When we look at the future of connectivity, I think that one of the things that Dr. Bolaji Balogun said, sorry, I'm calling you doctor. Maybe I've conferred you with honorary doctor, future doctor. But the key thing he said that was very striking on his presentation, and he was talking about everything as a service. So I see the future of connectivity as a shared infrastructure. There will be a combination of fixed broadband. You're still going to have fiber. You will never find a world where fiber will be completely eliminated. So you will still have the wireless technologies, whether it's 5G or 6G. Actually, what I've found that 6G is also being developed. From my point of view, before the use cases of 5G is fully consummated, thank you, Herman, for talking about the use cases. But you realize that 5G is also in development. And then you also have this whole idea of LEO, low Earth orbit satellites, that a couple of operators out there are putting out there. You have the Starlink guys who are trying to compete in that space. And then you have the AWS with their project Kuiper, which they intend to launch 3,000 constellation of satellites. So you will find a combination of different technology, whether it is fiber, whether it is fixed wireless, whether it is wireless technologies, or whether it is LEO satellite. There will be a combination. That's what I see as a future. But regardless of the form or shape in which those will come to play, every operator must learn how to share. The days of everybody building independent infrastructure, duplicating infrastructure, those days are over, because now you're talking about capital efficiency. One of the key drivers of this summit is about sustainability. If you're going to have a sustainable industry, you need to have a profitable industry. yes, as industry players, we're clamoring for tariff increase or price increase for us to be profitable, but we also need to change our business model when it comes into sharing infrastructure. So we will get to a point whereby, for example, there is no reason why an operator should duplicate fiber infrastructure. There is no reason why. We did that in the telco sector before the telco industry was given back. Though every operator was doing trade by barter. I remember working for V-Mobile at the time, and if you wanted to share a tower with MTN, then you have to say, which tower am I going to give you in Lagos for me to get a qualified, the same amount of tower of the same value in another place. But when telco came, it simplified that structure. Now, the 70% of your cost of building fiber infrastructure is digging, trenching. So why do we, when you look at Lagos to Ibadan, for example, expressway, you will see like 5 different fiber infrastructure on different side of the road. That model is over. Those days, capital was awash. Everybody was pushing money into the technology industry, $70 billion of infrastructure investment in Nigeria. Now, the days to optimize, even though we still need a lot of investment, especially when you're driving 5G deployment, that requires a lot of capex. For that to be sustainable, that has to be shared. So operators need to start doing what they call network as a service, and operators need to start thinking of how to compete not only on coverage, but also compete on service quality and compete on customer service, on other kind of innovation. So the future of technology will be a combination of all the technology, satellite, fixed broadband, wireless broadband, but most importantly, the future of technology or connectivity will be a shared network.
Well said. Thank you very much. So you've highlighted 2 very important points. One is shared services, and the other is sustainability. So let's talk a bit more on sustainability, and I'm coming to you, Mr. Erabo. And my question to you is, how do you think clean and renewable energy sources can be integrated in all of this infrastructure we're talking about? You want to use this?
Okay, let me use this. Thanks a lot. Good evening, everybody, or rather, good afternoon. I think, before you answer that question, just like Egbon Bolaji spelled out, there's a history to the sector. And so we need to understand why is renewables such an important topic today. And there are various reasons for that. The other day, I heard an MNO say they spent 28 billion a month on energy. And then the other day, I was hearing that the telco space, I think, used to import about 300 million liters of diesel every year. And if you run a business or your household, that hits you in the face. And then along the line, there's been tremendous improvement in the efficiency and costs for renewables. But when you talk about renewable energy, you now need to ask yourself, how do you apply it? Where do you apply it? And if you look at the network, probably the active network, the BTSs, the MSCs, and the data centers. I heard the MD of rack sector talking about trying to bring in European traffic into Africa. There's no way that's going to happen if your data center runs on non-renewable energy sources. And when you talk about DCs and megawatts, there's a reason for that. It's power. Now, in Nigeria, you could also look at renewable energy based on the location. What I mean by location is it urban, is it peri-urban, is it rural? Each of these locations has different requirements and opportunities for renewables, be it solar, wind, battery systems, and to some extent, depending on where you sit in the divide, a bit of gas. Now, certainly in the BTSs, in the urban areas, there's a challenge when it comes to solar. But I was reading a study released yesterday or last week that in Lagos alone, there's 15 gigawatts of renewable energy available. So the thing really is, how do you bring these renewable energy sources to reduce the cost of your operations to ensure your service quality and uptime meets regulatory requirements, right? And then therefore scale it in such a way you're not struggling with your supply chain. And we support the industry in several ways, and we had a particular client says, he has 5,000 base stations. Help me figure out how I can reduce the cost, how I can bring the renewable energy, right? And what we did was take those 5,000 base stations and map it to discos, right? And when we mapped it to discos, we also mapped the energy requirements, right? And we begin to see a bit of a pattern. And what we now did next was, based on the location, what's the best renewable energy source for it? And then came up with a plan, that clearly showed that if you use the utility, as an example, band A, band B, band C, depending on what you're looking at, you could strip away 60-70% of your costs. The deployment now becomes an issue. What's your go-to-market strategy? The good thing is that you now have a very established project development space where you have companies that can change your CAPEX to OPEX by you creating a power as a service or energy service platform. And the good thing about those guys is that they got significant funding from the World Bank. I think the World Bank have launched a Mission 300 and put $20 billion on the table. And that $20 billion on the table is available from a capital perspective for TowerCos to tap into and drive renewable energy penetration. So it's really about time where you look at your network and say, look, what's my plan? If it's 5G, how do I grow in that? And side by side, what's my energy deployment plan? And how am I going to finance that? And where are the financing sources? So the best way to look at it is look at your data, build an ecosystem where you have the right parties with the right skills to develop it and to run it out. One last point. With the history of the sector, you started out building the infrastructure by yourself. What will need to happen going forward is to get the renewable energy sector to converge with the telecom sector, and then you are able to achieve economies of scale. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. So, it's clear the opportunity is there. We just have to tap into it and speak to the right people like you. Thank you once again. So let's now look at how the future of connectivity will impact various sectors. And I'm coming to you, Dr. Coker. Look at sectors such as education, healthcare, transportation. How do we see all of these impacting these sectors in the future?
Significantly, it's fundamental. We all talk about the impact of penetration of broadband. It underpins the delivery of content and the use of content, whether it's education, whether it's health, whether it's e-government, citizens' experience, and so on. Connectivity is fundamental to that. So however we do it, we need to get meaningful broadband through whatever means. If it's 5G, if it's low Earth orbit satellites, and so on. I think also one thing that's coming out here is collaboration. And it's interesting about the sustainability thing, because one big issue for me is how do you get hold of power? How do you get hold of the least polluting powers possible? And then how can you get hold of sustainable power? And can you get the mix for it to be, so if you have shared resources, my answer is not about power right now, sustainable, but I talk to you because it's such a big issue, right, across the continent. Now for connectivity, getting the right connectivity in and at the right cost, we need to start to have open access networks. And my sister company, WIOC, provides connectivity. and we've been building open access networks across the country, across Lagos. What it does is it means that ISPs don't have the leverage to get all that capital anyway. But once you have the base infrastructure in place, they can ride over that infrastructure and deliver the services at the endpoint. It means, therefore, you drive a lot more competition to the endpoint. It means, therefore, that the quality of service increases significantly. But there's a challenge we have in that you have issues with fiber cards, so on. The industry uses the term protection in terms of how much redundancy do you have in order to get reliable service to the endpoint. So it's going to force us, just not having one operator to build their own services, is to have pretty much like everyone becoming an open access provider, and you optimize across the infrastructure investment that everyone's done. In that way, with the open access networks, you can actually then reach a lot of these points of use. The other key thing is fiber to the home, or fiber to the hub, or fiber to the point of use. By having open access, we're building a load of that across Lagos now, and some of the other big towns. It means, therefore, that you can, if you're going past a school, you can have a branch that delivers efficient capacity for use at much, much lower price points. Those are the kind of solutions that are emerging that will allow us to deliver connectivity. And once you deliver that connectivity, then all of the usage scenarios that drive value, e-education, e-government, e-health, become very, very possible. Actually, e-health is starting to become a real thing now, because you're having expertise online in real time, looking at operations, and that happens now, even in Nigeria.
Yeah, even in our offices, our various companies, we have HMO services online, remotely, without having to visit the hospitals. Thank you very much. And you've spotted the importance of collaboration in achieving all of this. Let me just ask this one question, still on 5G, Mr. Herman. What do you see as the challenges affecting the delivery of 5G services today, and what are the innovative solutions in place to ensure that 5G rollout is deployed all over Nigeria, given the low penetration of 5G today?
I think first and foremost to me would be adoption. How much penetration we see as a handsets, right? Unlike before I came here, I was seeing a lot of disruption in India, and as we speak, almost 40% of the traffic, data traffic, is on 5G. 80% of the handsets are 5G supportive. But first and foremost for us to do here is how much is the handset penetration. That's a big challenge for me, because as an industry, because ROI becomes a challenge. The second important thing I would say is connectivity. When I say connectivity, the challenge which we see is rolling out fiber, because more fiber, for connecting 5G, you need more fiber, you need more connectivity. That's the second challenge. But at the same time, I'm grateful to the government, which has recently declared fiber and telecom as a critical network infrastructure that is really helping us out, and also giving us the confidence that we should roll out more. I think the third one, which I would say is, as called out by everyone, is power. We need power. We need grid. Because 5G consumes more power than a traditional 2G, 3G, or a 4G equipment. So if you have to deploy 5G, you need more power. And I don't want to one way deploy 5G and on the other phase run away from our responsibility of controlling sustainability. So these are the challenges that I see are coming our way. What are the solutions? I think hybrid ways of working, hybrid solution that is coming. I think we are closely collaborating with ATC only on hybrid solutions. When I say first is connecting all the sites to grid. Then second, coming with solar solutions. Third, I would say is buying equipment which doesn't need air conditioning. So we are buying equipment which can sustain in higher temperatures and higher level of humidities. So these are the quick solutions that we are working on, and we are quite confident and excited about our future investments in 5G. Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. Quite a number of questions from our audience I can see here, thanks to technology and connectivity. So I'll be taking some of the questions. We're almost out of time, but we'll try and make it very quick. So there's a question here from Uloma Lillian Okorie, working with Airtel Nigeria. And she says, with the world on the verge of becoming hyper-connected, a number of important issues and problems pertaining to infrastructure, technology, security, and policy come up. So her question, how can fair access to connectivity be guaranteed? That's one, quite a number of questions. Maybe I'll just read it out and then we can see how many we can answer. The second question is, how can we handle networks increasing energy consumption? The third, how can we protect next generation networks from changing online dangers? I don't think I get this. The fourth is, how will network infrastructure and spectrum regulation change? What effects will future networks have on employment and skill needs? I like this fifth question because the world is changing and we know the skill sets we have today might not suffice tomorrow. So who would like to take any of these questions? Please, Shadi, go ahead.
I like that last question as well. One of the things that I think about when I think about the future of connectivity and the future of technology more broadly is this web of what are the different pieces that play into it. Like how do we tap in if we're not necessarily a network infrastructure provider or we're not necessarily a coder, for instance. Having a way to educate people about the importance of infrastructure and broadband connectivity and the different pieces to the puzzle and how they can fit into that is key. I'm a member of the women, it's WITN, it's like Women in Technology of Nigeria, and that was one of the things that we do is help young girls understand the different components. So whether you're going to be in finance, you're going to look at investment models, you're looking at the customer service aspects of infrastructure networks and companies, whether you're looking at HR, whether you're looking at cloud, and what does that mean? Having education and having people who are willing to go into the schools and teach about this is extremely important. When you look at the sustainability side, I actually had a very interesting conversation with a mother. I won't say the company that this lady worked at, but it was at an event. And the mother was telling me that she was so upset that her child was so fixated on environmental studies. And it's not something that was unique. I mean, it's not something that was talked about a lot growing up in our generation or older generations. But I would explain to her that, no, actually, we really need people who are studying environmental studies, who are really digging deep into sustainability and how that plays a role in things like telecom service provision. It's extremely important. We need to do a better job of creating an environment that enables people to enter the field, but maybe from other angles that they weren't thinking about before. I am so sorry. I am going to leave.
Thank you.
I have to catch a flight.
Thank you so much. If you could just give us 2 minutes, we are wrapping up. Thank you. There's a question for Dr. Coker, maybe in 30 seconds or less. Someone said you spoke about the increase in data centers and global improvement in cloud computation. How soon do you think Nigeria will be able to tap into the IoT and support the in-house industries to make them significantly recognized globally? 30 seconds or less.
It's happening now.
Thank you. Awesome. So we are gradually coming to the end of our panel conversation. It's a very interesting one, and time is up. I believe we can catch up with the panelists during dinner and continue the conversations. Quite a number of questions raised, and I guess we can all approach the individual panelists to get our answers to these questions. So to conclude, we've discussed shaping the future of connectivity. We've looked at trends such as AI, 5G, edge computing, and the likes. We can say we are on the brink of a transformative era. And as we navigate this period, we want to remember that the opportunities are endless. Let's continue to collaborate for a brighter future. Thank you to our esteemed panelists, and thank you to the audience for your time. Have a good evening.
Thank you very much, Carol. Can we give them another warm round of applause? And I'm going to call on our CFO, pardon me, our COO, he used to be CFO, COO Afolabi Oladujoye, to join them on stage for a group photograph. I don't see Soji. Okay, Soji is here. Please join them as well. And the chairman of our board, Professor Konedo, please join them as well. Thank you. We do have a token of appreciation for our panelists, and I know Shade Dada has to leave, so we're going to start with you. Afolabi is going to stay on stage, and all the panelists, please just take a seat for 2 seconds. Shade, we want to give you something on stage. Yes. She won't, I promise. Where is it? All right. Afolabi, just a quick plaque just to say thank you. All right, Mr. Dr. Tunde Coker, Afolabi. That's not his. Can we get Dr. Coker's? Thank you. Or we can do, okay. Thank you. This is Mr. Coker. Sorry, Mr. Femi. We'll come to you in just a second. We had it in order initially, but because Shadi had to leave, we just had to swap it around a little bit. Thank you very much. That's Mr. Banibi. While we're doing this, can we get the QR code for Menti? We're going to play a little game just to switch gears a little bit. Thank you so much. We do have a lost wallet, so please make sure you don't leave without your wallet. Number of cards in there. If you don't have your wallet on you, please let us know and we'll give it to you before you leave. Okay, do we have the QR code? I know. We have to do this. We just want to test your knowledge of the industry for 2 minutes. I promise this won't take more than 2 minutes. Please scan the code real quick. Put in your nickname, whatever, you don't have to give us your actual name. Let's have some fun with it. And I promise we made this very easy. We tried. So, are we ready? TJ, are we ready? We're ready? How many people do we have? Who wants to be a millionaire? Okay, let's do this. First, okay, we have people joining. I believe that's what that means. Thumbs ups. All right, TJ, let's go to the questions. We have just 2 for this round. Question 1 of 5. We got 31 players, 33, 34. Let's get to 50 and then we start. 50. Okay, let's do this. Let's get to 70. I feel like I'm in an auction. Okay, we can start now. Let's go. Question number 1. You have 15 seconds to answer. Winners are chosen by speed to answer and correct questions. So let's go. Question number 1. When did ATC Nigeria begin operations in Nigeria? This one's a giveaway. If you were listening earlier. 5 seconds. And time's up. Okay, most people got it. Okay. Fantastic, 2015, for the record. Okay, question number 2. This one's easy, I promise. Okay, question number 2, are we ready? Let's go. Fast, answer fast to get more points. And when was the first GSM call made in Nigeria? The first GSM call in Nigeria. 5 seconds. Oh, okay, most people got it. A round of applause for the people who got it. Fantastic. We'll come back to this in just a second. Let's move forward. As many of you know, ATC is a subsidiary of American Tower Corporation out of the US, a New York Stock Exchange listed company. We are in 7 markets here in Africa. We're making an impact. We're proud of the work that we're doing across Africa. We're in over 20 countries around the globe. And we do have a CEO for Africa who was unable to be here physically with us, but he did send his well wishes. So cue that video real quick, and right after that, we'll jump to our next panel discussion.
Hello, and welcome to our Nigeria Stakeholder event for 2024. And thank you for joining. My apologies as I'm clearly not with you in country, but I have a great excuse. I'm celebrating a big personal milestone with my wife this year. It's our 20th anniversary, in fact, 20th anniversary this same week. Celebrating that anniversary and preparing for this sort of message got me thinking about partnerships. And you know, building a great partnership and what that's enabled, you know, for us in Nigeria. Over the 9 years we've been here partnering with our customers, with government stakeholders, with our suppliers, we've really managed to build something truly special, something really beautiful. And so I'm really glad that in today's conference, today's stakeholder event, we're spending time talking about the power of partnerships, because there really is power in partnerships. Too often I find that parties think about what's in something for themselves. You know, how do I've used the frame before, how do I maximize my piece of the pie? And truly, actually, what I want to challenge you all to think about today is, how do we work together rather to grow the size of the pie rather than fighting for our piece of the pie? That's, for me, key as we think about how we partner together to, you know, build a more connected Nigeria. And so what I would also say when we talk about partnerships is, I like to think about the key ingredients. And for me, it starts with a shared vision. It's very much about them being committed. And of course, it's about open and honest two-way communication. And so in Nigeria, but like in most countries where we operate in Africa. Our vision is to build a more connected Nigeria. And I think that's something I'd like us to focus on today as we explore the ways we can work together to achieve that. And I am pleased to share with you that we remain very committed to Nigeria. We've passed the $2 billion investment in Nigeria recently, and that's total investment since we started operations here 9 years ago. Really proud of that, and we continue to invest in Nigeria. And that's really, thanks to first our customers. I'd like to take a minute here to thank our customers, specifically for, supporting us over the last 18 months that have been, I know, very challenging for all stakeholders and very challenging for yourselves. So thank you. I'd also like to thank the Nigerian government and all its stakeholders. I found the Nigerian government to be very engaged and very open to finding win-win solutions in, as I've said, what has been a very challenging and difficult environment. And an example of that is the recent amendment to the withholding tax regulations, which has enabled us to continue to invest our capital into Nigeria. And you'll see that both in terms of the numbers shared for this year and our commitments going into 2025, which I'm confident will build on the digital ecosystem in Nigeria, and as I've said, linking back to our vision of building a more connected Nigeria. And then lastly, in terms of my messaging, I have to and I want to thank the Nigerian ATC team. You guys are amazing. Led now by Soji, who I'm very excited to have as our first Nigerian CEO. I know that this team will take this business to greater heights. I know that this team, led by Soji, will be a worthy partner to government, to our customers, and to our suppliers. For those of you who don't know, Nigeria continues to be a thought leader for us in American Tower globally. Not only in power solutions where they've innovated and continue to innovate with deployments, but even in being the first in American Tower globally to deploy RAN as a service for a customer, allowing us to test out how the ecosystem may evolve, how we can partner, as I've said earlier, to build a bigger pie to connect Nigeria. So with those messages, I'd like to thank you, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the event, and I look forward to connecting with you in the future. Thank you all.
Can we give him a round of applause in his absence? Thank you very much, Marek Busby, for that message. I'd like to acknowledge the presence of the CTO of MTN Nigeria, Mr. Yahaya Ibrahim. Thank you for being here. Pleasure to have you. Also like to acknowledge the presence of Engineer Voncourt David Nagpark. He's being represented by Dr. Innocent Barikor. He's the Head of Operations, Lagos Port and Sustainable Banking, NESRA. Can we give him a round of applause? Thank you for being here. Also in our midst, Mr. Emmanuel Cosmas Tombere. He's being represented by Mr. Mahmoud Adam Kambar, representing the Permanent Secretary, Federal Ministry of Environment. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it. So just before we move to our next panel, we're talking about advancing connectivity, and many of us in this room hope our jobs are not at stake with AI. So we're going to just hear from the MD of Galuli how connectivity is being advanced through AI, or how AI is advancing connectivity. For just a few moments, he's just going to walk us through what's happening in that space, and which is something that's very key for us at ATC in how we optimize our power usage and just optimize our operations as a whole. So please welcome him as he comes, Ronen Barrell, CEO of Galuli. There he is. By the way, he came all the way from Israel for this event. Probably other things as well, but I know he came for this as well. So give him a round of applause as he comes.
Hello, good evening. I think it's good evening already. So yes, my name is Ronen Barrell. I'm the CEO of Galuli. I really want to thank you for letting me speak for the next few minutes about AI, and especially AI in this industry and on what we are doing. For those who are not familiar with Galuli, we are providing remote energy management, mostly for telecom sites. We do it mostly on distributed energy, where you have a lot of assets and they are all distributed and they are unattended, which is telecom. I'm happy to say that we are proud to be ATC partners for 12 years already, especially in Africa. Out of the 7 countries in Africa, we are fully covering 6 of them. And here in Nigeria, from day one, we are celebrating 9 years working here in Nigeria, covering all the network of ATC here. So today, I would like to speak about AI. I'm not an AI specialist, I'm just what I am, okay? So what I'm familiar with is energy management and what we can do from the basics to the top. Now, we all know what is the purpose of us being here, of us working with the networks and of course of the TowerCo. Eventually, what we need to do is optimize the uptime and optimize the cost. This is basically, if we succeed in this, we succeeded in everything, no matter what we have done. But all these tasks and operations around it are exactly for the purpose of optimizing uptime and optimizing cost. Okay? Now, when I'm talking about AI, it's not a separate model. It is just an additional layer of making all these tasks and operations much more efficient, so the uptime will be better and the operation will be much better to this. So, when we're talking about AI, AI is a very sexy term, right? It's the hottest topic around telecom these days, and especially in energy management. But I must say my personal view on AI, and it's a bit cynical, AI is not a magic box where you throw in data and you expect miracles to happen. It doesn't happen like that. For AI to be practical, you need to build the building blocks, okay? AI is only a natural evolution of everything that you collect and maintain from the bottom. So, what we are doing in our system, but it is relevant for anywhere you do AI, is we are starting by collecting data. We collect data minute by minute from the site. We verify data. If the data is not clean, if the data is not validated, there is no reason why you continue, because nothing will happen afterward. We provide logic, trends, live alarms. We provide solution to the NOC. We provide analytics. We provide all the reporting to the things. All these building blocks, we've been working on them for 15 years, okay? And we keep on working on them every day of our life. Now, the AI is at the top of the pyramid. The AI is just a natural stage to make all this much better and much easier and much more efficient for our customers. This is what we do. So, if we're talking about the first layer of this, the automatic analysis, you know, the 3 main things that AI can help our customers is first, lower more the manual work. We try not to work manually, and we want more actionable insights. But actionable insights, if they are not practical, it's a waste of time. If you are asking the practical business question, AI can help you. So no more manual work, more automations. Second, we'll move from reactive to proactive. You want not to chase the alerts that are coming from the network. You want to prevent them. So you have predictive analysis in order to avoid for future issues to be there. And third, you have more optimized operation, meaning you do less site visits, you do less maintenance, and by that you save a lot of money. Now, the automatic analysis is just a first layer of what we call the 3-layer path to the future. Why is that? Because let's say that you have great analysis, you have great actionable insights, but what do you do with them? On a network in a country like Nigeria. So you want the system to work for you. You want the system to fix it for you and to make it for you. So this is why you are moving from analysis to proactive management. The system can detect anomalies. The system can create automatic tickets. The system can avoid unnecessarily site visit by sending the technicians to the right site according to the right priority. Okay? And this 3rd layer is where you do the preventive action. Our system, for example, can orchestrate all the networks automatically. You can, instead of do manual remote control on each and every site or visit a site, you can let the system do everything automatically on thousands of sites. We are doing, for example, configuration management. We scan all the configurations of all the sites and fix if they are wrong. I will give you an example. In Kenya, we have launched this, what we call X-ray module, a couple of months ago, and within 1 month, the Kenyan team reduced the fuel consumption by additional 7%, just because we let the system work, okay? 7% multiplied by 4,000 sites, you can imagine how much fuel we are talking about, especially with the numbers that were set. And this is just the additional layer. So all in all, this is how I see AI, and if I'm going back to the beginning, AI is not a magic. Build the building blocks, make it practical, ask the practical questions, and then it can work for you. It can work for you perfectly. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ronan, for that. Thank you for shedding some light on how AI is advancing connectivity. Thank you. All right, at this time, we're going to move to our second and final panel for today. We're going to be talking about public-private partnerships. As you've heard today, partnerships is a key theme for everything that we're talking about today. So we're going to be doing that and also talking about policy development when we talk about advancing connectivity. And to help guide that conversation is my colleague. He's a senior manager for legal at ATC Nigeria, Lanre Kuforiji. Please give him a warm round of applause as he comes. And don't forget, we do have a QR code for your questions and comments. And please, we also have dinner just in a few, so please don't hurry off. We'd like to meet you. I personally would like to meet many of you before you leave. So please join us for dinner at the end of the event. Larry, over to you.
Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to try and make this session quite fast. And like Aderonke said, this is focused on public-private partnerships and policy development for advancing connectivity. Just in the spirit of making this fast, I will quickly like to call the panelists. The first person on the panel is a very distinguished and eminent lady. That's the newly appointed Minister for Industry. She's ably represented by Usaina Abdulkader. Doctor, please a round of applause for her.
It might seem crazy what I'm about to say.
So Usaina would be representing Dr. Oduwole, who, as we all know, is the Minister for Industry, and just about 48 hours ago, was the special advisor to the President on PEBEC. I will move quickly to the next member of the panel. The next member of the panel is Mr. Abiodun Aina. Is the Principal Investment Officer at the International Finance Corporation. Please, can we give it up for Mr. Aina? Mr. Aina leads IFC's infrastructure business in Anglophone West Africa, comprising Ghana, Liberia, Nigeria, and Sierra Leone. He's based in Lagos and he has extensive investment experience. Very quickly, I will call a good friend of mine, but an outstanding innovationist and strategist. He's the Chief Strategy and Innovation Officer at MTN Nigeria. He's had over 23 years of experience in the telecom sector, and he's worked, across a broad spectrum from the supply chain, program management, strategy development, in the UK, Middle East, and Nigeria. Please welcome Babalola Oyeleye. The next member of the panel is Shirley Somwa. Shirley is a partner at Cardinal Stone Capital Advisors. I'll just say CCA. A West Africa-focused private equity fund manager that provides growth capital to high-potential SMEs. She's passionate about transformational impact at scale, and she has over a decade of experience spanning management, consulting, and investing. Please, can we give it up for Shirley? And last but by no means the least is Mr. Dayo Abiodun. Mr. Abiodun is presently the Special Advisor to the Ogun State Government on ICT. He successfully managed the Ogun State Bureau of Information Technology. And, that's my state, so I'm quite impressed at what Mr. Abiodun has been able to do, in a very short period of time. The state has earned gallants for the best state in ICT infrastructure development in 2019, the second runner-up award in ICT human capital development in 2019, and then the second best state in ICT penetration in 2020. Please, let's give it up for Mr. Dayo Abiodun. All right. I think I am, pardon me, I love my mother a lot, and my wife, so I think I'll start with the ladies on the panel. So for Shirley, the question I will start, looking at advancing connectivity, and the role and impact that PPPs can play in this space. Can you sort of speak to the pillars available to drive the ease of doing business, in Nigeria?
Sure, thank you. Good evening, everyone. I think as we think about the ease of doing business, it's helpful that in talking about the sector, we've talked a lot about both what are some of the opportunities, but also how the opportunities mean there's a significant amount of investment that's required. As we've spoken about, starting with Mr. Balogun, in thinking where does capital come from, capital has options. As I think, for instance, as a West Africa-focused investor, we look across our geographic region and say, not only where are the most compelling opportunities, but where is it going to be easiest for me to both make my investment and then get my capital out? And so that's where the ease of doing business comes in. One of the most widely accepted measures of the ease of doing business for a while now has been the World Bank's Ease of Doing Business report. And I think on that measure, at least as of the last time it was published in 2020 or so, Nigeria has done quite well. Over the last several years, I think largely driven by some of the PEBEC initiatives, credit to them, the ranking has increased as Nigeria has instituted a lot of reforms that have made it easier to do business. But I think, as I think about the pillars more broadly, I categorize them as what are the things that you think about in starting a business and getting permits and entering? what are some of the more operational elements of actually running a business, and then what are the aspects you think about in terms of investor protections and sort of general rule of law. If we think then about the lens of public-private partnership and the roles different people have to play, I think on the public side of things and government agencies, the first one, so what are the operational elements, permitting, etc., there's been quite a lot of progress. And then Nigeria is generally an increasingly positive place in terms of investor protections and rule of law. I think where there's still room, and probably what's relevant for this room, is thinking about some of the more operational elements. It's the infrastructure, it's electricity, it's things like that, and how to improve those. From that perspective, I think government's biggest role to play is to stay out of the way. Is to provide the enabling environment, but to make it possible for private sector players like ourselves, capital providers, and then infrastructure providers and industry players like yourselves, to actually be the ones to provide this infrastructure. In the interest of time, I think I'll stop there and not talk too much, but really thinking about what are the ways in which we can work together in providing some of those more operational elements in a sustainable way, and in maybe specific to the sector, also from a regulatory perspective, having a regulatory environment that is protective of the consumer, but also is cognizant of what it takes to build a sustainable business in a way that there are, for instance, more cost recoverable tariffs. So I'll leave it there.
Okay, thank you very much for that. That was loaded, in one question. So for Mr. Abiodun Aina, my question to you is this: can policy makers and industry leaders collaborate to foster innovation, specifically in connectivity?
Yes, I think that's the quick answer to your question. And I think in Nigeria, we've heard many speakers today talk about examples in the past, right? So, from the keynote speaker, Mr. Balogun, to even the last panel, where in summary you talked about Nigeria going from just almost 500,000 users of telephones to whatever the number is now, 150 million, probably even more, right? Now, what are the ways that policymakers and the private sector can collaborate? I think I'll look at it in, let's say, 2 or 3 buckets. So first off, what sorts of enabling factors will help the private sector take off in the market, right? So first off, you need a market. You need, just whether it's demographics. I mean, and Nigeria is an excellent case in point. 200 million and growing. Second, you need some kind of, enabling regulations, right? So I think in the telecom sector, you've had excellent examples in the past. In fact, my focus at a point, in fact, it still is because I cover the infrastructure space. I wish our power sector can borrow from some of the good examples in the telecom sector. Perhaps you see a lot more progress there. Whether it's in terms of enabling, shared infrastructure, co-location, things like that will reduce ultimately the cost of the end user, right, and the quality of services that they get. Whether it's in the form of taxation, right? So, tariffs on things like steel, the ease of acquiring land for erecting your towers, things like that. These are areas where government and the private sector can collaborate in trying to figure out what are those impediments to the private sector developing. I think one other big example in Nigeria, although I know it's not that popular right now because we are going through these massive reforms, whether it's, in terms of the currency, taking away the subsidy on fuel. Over time, those things will lead to having a more robust capital market, markets where companies like, yourselves, the MNOs, would then be able to tap into and raise local currency financing at scale. I'll stop there. Thanks.
Fantastic. And, to talk to your point, I think just about a month ago, the president, signed the Critical National Infrastructure Executive Order. So that's actually, directly also something that we see. And I agree with you that there's a lot of potential for more of this. So, Mr. Babalola Oyeleye, looking at the present state of the ICT industry in Nigeria, do you consider there are opportunities for driving digitalization? And from an MNO perspective, what are these opportunities that you see?
There are absolutely opportunities, and I think we need to look at it from two sides. One is internally, how we digitalize to drive cost efficiency. And we're all aware of the macroeconomic circumstances in Nigeria. So what is it that we're able to do through digitalization to bring about more operational efficiency and bring down our costs? An example of what we're looking at on our side is how we deliver our customer support and our customer services. Integrating AI into our chatbot, for example, and reducing the need to have physical agents making physical contacts with our customers. It's just one of the examples, and that's from an internal perspective and something the industry can look at. From an external perspective, and maybe this is really speaking to how we drive skills in Nigeria, what is it that the industry can do to digitalize education delivery, for example, in Nigeria, and start to really fill the education gap that exists. And so we have this backbone. How are we able to provide the right devices to enable access, especially in the rural areas, for youngsters to get educated?
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much. I was almost drawn to ask my next question, to direct it to my state, Ogun State, but I would like to go to Usaini on this question. So, Usaini, so talking about, the work of PEBEC, and honestly, Dr. Oduwole has, done a lot, that you can't hide, how PEBEC has improved the ease of doing business. But how can businesses involved in connectivity benefit from the opportunities available, within the scope and the mandate of PEBEC?
Okay, thank you. Good evening. So I would say that it's important for businesses to look at PEBEC as a partner and explore this strategic partnership. PEBEC really is in the business of carrying out reforms. So over time as well, we've had engagements with private sector businesses where they bring their challenges, especially challenges that affect the sectors, to us, and then we act as a liaison between the stakeholders and the federal government to ensure that these reforms are such that they will be beneficial to the sector as a whole. So one of the most recent examples that comes to mind for me would be certain issues around conflicting regulations. So we have situations where there are conflicting regulations. There are instances where you have policy flip-flops. There's a new regulation today and then it's suspended. One of the initiatives we've taken at the Secretariat is to have a regulators forum. We've had instances where we find out that there are situations involving multiple regulators and then they are only just meeting themselves for the first time. So you can see how that would create bottlenecks in doing business in Nigeria. So we had this regulators forum. We called all the regulators together to say, these are the issues that are facing the Nigeria regulatory landscape. How do we resolve it? One of our proposals is to have a nationwide homegrown regulatory impact analysis framework, where we come together as a country, most of our regulators, and I agree that these are the questions we need to ask before coming up with a regulation. We're asking questions like, for example, would regulation be the best fit to resolve the problem identified? It's not always the case that it's government intervention that is necessary. It could be an issue that could be resolved within the stakeholders themselves. Now, when we realize that it is government intervention that is necessary, the next question would be, is regulation the best way to go? It is not always the best way. Also, we talk about issues like stakeholder engagement, also looking at the cost benefit of having regulation to resolve the issues. And the regulators were open to it. So we're currently working on creating that analysis for Nigerian regulators to ensure that when regulation is passed at the end of the day, it is the best fit for the problem. It also has stakeholder input to ensure that there's buy-in. And then once there's buy-in, there's little or no resistance, right, to the regulation. So that's one of the things that we're doing, just to encourage stakeholders to look at PEBEC as a partner and also to leverage PEBEC. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. You know, again, I'm one of the, supporters of PEBEC, both in terms of the work, that PEBEC does, and also from personal insights as to targeted interventions, from PEBEC. And I think, what you've talked about, a multi-stakeholder level, forum, because sometimes, you get some regulations and you think, the regulators are acting at cross purposes. So thank you very much for that. Now, bringing this home for me, Mr. Dayo Abiodun, sir, how are states leveraging ICT and connectivity innovation to improve educational development? I mean, I just read out laurels of what, my state has been able to do in that space, targeting education. So, but from a general point of view, how do you think states can leverage ICT connectivity just to improve education?
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. In terms of ICT and leveraging technology, it's not just in the educational space. What we've tried to do is look at what are the parts of government that actually impact a lot of people. You got to look at the revenue perspective, because there are a lot of, to do ICT and digital transformation, as everyone knows, there's a lot of capital involved in it. The state has a lot of demand in terms of resources, and they only have a limited resource. So what we've managed to do is, target revenue generating areas. I mean, as you know, the schools are free. Nobody really pays for them and stuff, especially government schools. So what we did was, for instance, we did the OGRS for you to have the ability, to do your taxes wherever you are. So you don't need to come to Abeokuta and all that stuff. So now we're working on the land aspect. So from the education, we had quite a few of companies, talking about e-education and all this stuff. And I'm sure a lot of us can relate to it. So you do have different variables, right? You have, they want to bring, you need the tablets, right? You need connectivity, you need electricity, so there are a lot of stuff in terms of infrastructure that's not readily available. So what we did was, what are the areas where we can start digitizing our education, right? So working with the Commissioner for Education in the state, for instance, the lessons, right, that teachers have to prepare on a weekly basis or monthly basis, that is completely digitized. Knowing the numbers of students, in each classes, across the entire state, that's completely digitized. In terms of, the exams that they write and how they do the transfer from different schools, that's completely digitized. So the we talk a lot about the E stuff, and I really appreciate it, but the biggest challenge is what, everyone has pretty much, referenced, power, connectivity. A lot of the schools, there's no power. They're not, they don't have the grid. And you don't want to leave, students behind. So you do have schools that are in the city. You might be able to give them tablets. Of course, they have connectivity. But these are students that are all in, let's say, primary 3 or primary 4, right? They have to be on the same page in terms of access, to, the curriculum, access to technology. So we don't, we already have issues of, digital divide. And so going back to your question, I think sometimes we just have to take baby steps, right? To make sure that we do have the infrastructure. It's like the CEO that gave a presentation earlier, right? there are different layers. So layer 2 is dependent on layer 1. Layer 3 dependent on layer 2, right? If layer 1 is not working or not functional, everything you put above it doesn't really matter. So from the educational part, we're doing our best. We have partners that are coming in, but the biggest challenge we have is power connectivity, but we are making progress. So it's going to take time, but we will get there. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I would ask a question focused on investment. So this is for Mr. Abiodun Aina. And just to mention, I believe the QR code, can be put on the screen. So if you've got a question, please, just put your questions, and then we can take 1 or 2 questions from the audience. So for Mr. Abiodun Aina, so what are the enablers in place that operators, in the connectivity space or telecoms sector generally can leverage to drive further investment? So, I mean, for example, is it possible that operators who want to do a certain level of connectivity rollouts, are there, investment opportunities they can tap into? I know that, in the prior panel, one of the speakers had spoken around a 20 billion, for instance, carbon, fund available, the more, we go green and all of that. So are there things, that can be leveraged investment-wise, either within or outside the scope of the IFC?
Okay. Well, thanks for the question. So there are enablers, right? I mean, I think one of the former speakers talked about, or someone on the last panel talked about Mission 300, which is, so there was an announcement in April. It was actually a couple of years in the making, but there was an announcement by the World Bank's president and the AFDB's president that ourselves, AFDB, will partner to try and finance 300 million new connections for Africans between now and 2030. So what that's designed to do is to accelerate the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goal 7, or SDG 7 on energy access, right? Now, within IFC, a lot of what we'll talk about will be in terms of access, but then also trying to put our money where our mouths are, right? So whether it's in form of, so in the next, I know people, what I hear talking to colleagues is, IFC, lots of talk, not a lot of, not a lot of investments happening. But I've said, in the next couple of weeks or months, you will start to see programs being rolled out. So for example, we expect our board to approve programs, at least on the IFC side, in the billions. I mean, I won't talk specifically about amounts right now because these have not been approved yet. Some of them designed to improve energy access. And then what's also behind that is also digital access as well, right? So whether it's, in terms of cheaper sources of financing for handsets, for example, or rural connectivity in terms of, so digitalization. I know we're talking a lot about energy, but also digitalization is what you're talking about as well. Over the next 5 to 10 years, IFC, the World Bank, and the Multilateral Investment Guarantees Agency, MIGA, combined, we're looking to put tens of billions of dollars in place. It's going to be Pan-African, not just for Nigeria. But because a lot of the access issues you have, we like to say Nigeria, unfortunately, is top of the league tables when it comes to, basically, the sorts of league tables where you don't want to be tops, right? So energy access, well, I mean, I don't start talking about poverty numbers here, right? But to summarize, there are lots of incentives, there are lots of programs that we're trying to put in place. We're trying to put our monies where our mouths are. We know that these programs only work if the cost of financing makes sense. These programs in Nigeria at least only work if you're able to deliver at least the long-term end of the programs in local currency. So there's a lot that we are working with within the institution. We're also trying to partner with others as well. So so watch this space. Expect to see a lot of stories in probably in the news. I would say over the next couple of months at least.
Fantastic. So you heard it from the horse's mouth. Watch this space. So a question for Shirley as we gradually begin to draw this panel to a close. So Shirley, when you consider the present fiscal and economic climate, in terms of the ongoing reforms, whether as to deregulation of the exchange rate or PMS supply, what strategies do you see telecoms operators deploying to sort of induce more economic activity, to induce people, for connectivity? So in a sense, the question is, how do telecoms operators navigate the challenges of the whole economic climate that looks a little bit gloomy, but yet we want to drive connectivity, we want to drive some level of activity?
Okay, thank you. I won't speak too much, first of all, to the reforms. We all feel them, they're painful. But I think when a patient is under treatment, it's often quite painful, and it's after you come out of it that you realize it was to your benefit. So hopefully we'll all see through the end of it. I'll answer your question, but I won't pretend to come into a room of telecom experts and tell people how to navigate the conditions. So I think I'll speak a bit more to perhaps what some of the opportunities are despite that, where an environment with very significant inflationary pressures, economic activity is suppressed because of that. But at the end of the day, for everyone's businesses to be viable, you need an economy that continues to grow and to function. And if I think about what it is that's the engine of many of our economies, and in Nigeria in particular, it's small businesses. And so I'll answer it in the sense of one of the things I think, one of the areas in which I think that operators in the telecom industry can really help to drive and catalyze small business. And that is through access to credit. Now, it's not the day-to-day business of probably almost anyone in this room, but I think there's a really strong role that people can play. There's a role that traditional banks have played and continue to play, but they're not the ones who are going to drive credit to the small businesses that are the engine of the economy. Where I think telco is uniquely positioned is that access to credit and access to well-priced credit is often a function of access to data and being able to use that data to determine credit worthiness, determine who to extend that credit to, for what periods, etc. And so I think, firstly, on the theme of collaboration that we've talked about today, it's to say that telco operators are a huge repository of data. What are ways in which these operators can partner with less traditional financial institutions, so fintechs, etc., to have access to this data, fee basis, whatever it is, but so that for people who are already playing the more disruptive role, providing credit to the people previously unbanked, can continue to do that. And then in some cases, I think there's also a place for developing innovative products directly within telecommunication operators that can directly provide this credit. So that's why I see an opportunity. It helps business to grow. If business is growing, there's more connectivity required. People can afford and pay for connectivity. And from a general economic perspective, more tax as well as you widen the tax base. So those would be my thoughts.
Okay, thank you for that. I will not round up this session and we'll quickly go to the questions. I think we've got one or two questions from the audience without still having another jab at Babalola. So my question is, what strategies do you think, the earlier panel, there was a focus around sustainability, going green, the whole spectrum around reducing carbon emission. So what strategies do you see that can be employed both to drive connectivity but then balance this with sustainability?
I think we've already spoken extensively about the power side of this issue. You're going to look at things like network virtualization, for example, where we're moving power away from diesel generation in our switching centers, for example. So we've passed on some of our problem to Soji in terms of the base stations, right? But then the switching centers are still a problem, and we're looking at moving away from diesel for the large power requirements in that space. I think there's then a need to look at other SDGs and sustainability around things like poverty and gender specifically. And we've spoken again about device availability, for example, right? And look, no matter what we do in this room, no matter what we talk about in this room, if we don't get affordable devices into the hands of millions in this country, then we're not necessarily going to deliver the aspiration. So for me, I think we really need to look at the sort of collaboration with IFC that has been spoken about to make sure that we can get these devices in country, number one, and number two, also look at PEBEC in terms of facilitating local capacity for these things. Mr. Balogun, I think, mentioned earlier, after 20-something years, there's no local device manufacturing in Nigeria. And devices cuts across mobile phones, also speaks to your broadband routers, your modems, etc. There's a lot we need to do in that regard to drive the other SDGs. If we can get devices into the hands of women, for example, you know that a lot of women are multipliers in their families, and they are small traders, and they bring income into the family. So I think for me, there's a lot we need to look at in terms of how we finance the capacity, the production, the availability to start to really tackle poverty and gender.
Okay, thank you very much. So we've got two questions. I don't know if Usaini is best placed for, but I mean, it's a question directed to government, so I will ask you, and that will be the last question for this panel. So the question says, how do companies in the telecommunication space, especially telcos like ATC, navigate varying regulation, multiple taxation across different states and local governments? Is this something that PEBEC is looking into or is willing to look into?
Thank you very much. Very spot on. I think it just speaks to what I had mentioned earlier about a regulators forum. So that is going to cure for a fact conflicting regulations, because one of the things that regulators are supposed to do is to consider what do we have currently in place, what are the existing things we have, whether it's policies, whether it's regulations, whether it's laws, to resolve whatever it is the problem that the regulation is trying to solve. So we first of all look inwards to see, do we have something that works? And then if not, we then look forward. So what that would do once that framework is being implemented is that it will resolve conflicting regulations. Okay. With regards to multiple taxation, I'm aware that there is a committee, the Taiwo Oyedele Committee, who is working to streamline the process to ensure that for certain things that are already taxed at the federal level, businesses do not have to grapple with it at the state level. We also need to understand that it also requires some form of cohesion among the federal and the state revenue services, as it were. Thank you. So I hope that I did justice to that question.
You sure did, by my standards. Please, can we give the panelists a round of applause? At this time, we will move into a short picture session. I believe we'll be joined by Soji as well as by Afolabi. And then there will be the presentation of plaques, just to say thank you, for the time and for joining us today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for a very insightful conversation. Thank you to all our panelists. I'm going to call on our CFO, Olukunle Olafare, to please join us on stage. Also our Commercial Director, Gordon Hache, and our Executive Head of Legal and Regulatory Affairs to join us on stage for a quick group picture. Yes, thank you. We're almost there. Dinner will be served in about 10 minutes. All right, and in token of our appreciation, I'm going to have the panelists sit, and I'm going to have Kunle stay on stage, our CFO, to come this way, right here. And we'll start with Abiodun Aino. Thank you for joining us. Yes. And Dr. Jumoke is not here, but we'll have her rep, Husseina, join us. Thank you. And Dayo Abiodun, thank you for being here, representing Ogun State. And Shirley Samua, thank you for being here. And last but certainly not least, Babalola Oyeleye from MTN, thank you for being here as well. We do have a brochure for this event. It's an e-brochure. I'm going to pop up the QR code on the screen. It has some really lovely information that we would like you to check out. So please feel free to download the e-brochure and enjoy. At this time, one of the things that's really important for us at ATC is that we focus on solutions and not problems. That's actually one of our core principles. And so, as much as we've talked about some of the challenges, we do want to leave here with some hope, and we want to leave here with some reassurance, but also highlight some of the discussions that we've had today. And as we leave as key stakeholders, what can we do? What's the one or two things that we can do when we leave here today to advance connectivity? And to help us sum up the conversation today, I'm going to call on our commercial director, Gordon Hatche, to give us a summary of what we've discussed today so that we remember as we leave what part we can play to advance connectivity. So please welcome him as he comes with a warm round of applause.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. And thank you for staying with us until the tail end of our program. Some of the key takeaways from what we've heard this evening: there is still a tremendous amount of growth ahead in our industry. And we need to act today. In fact, we need to start today in order to prepare for the bright future that's ahead of us. A future that promises significant growth, and growth that is orders of magnitude greater than anything we've seen over the past 2 decades. Now, in terms of actions we actually need to take, right? What do we need to do to be able to prepare for this growth that's ahead of us? Investments, various forms of investments. We need to invest in infrastructure, in bandwidth. We need to invest in utility scale energy, renewable energy. We need to invest in our people, you know, the talented professionals that drive the present industry and the future of our industry, so that we can keep them here. And then finally, we need to invest in our communities, right? All that we do is driven towards serving our communities, and we need to ensure that we are continuously investing in them as part of what we do every day. How do we fund these investments? I think Mr. Balogun has gone into extensive detail. So lots of funds, lots of wealth available in the local capital markets, and we need to start looking at how we can take advantage of those funds now. And of course, we look forward to our governments and regulators leading the way by creating an enabling environment that allows us to all do business more easily, ethically, and sustainably. And our partners, our customers, our vendors, MNOs, ISPs, everyone that supports us in helping to build a more connected Nigeria. We hope that we can continue to work with you, partner with you, collaborate with you to support all the ideas and initiatives that we've discussed today. As Dr. Maida said, I believe he said we'll be asking for more. Absolutely, we will be asking for more. More collaboration, more partnerships, more investment, more use of local capital, and of course, more support for our communities through our Digital Communities Initiative and other similar programs that provide CSR throughout the industry. As you finalize your 2025 budgets, I'll ask you, please keep these ideas in mind, and please keep us in mind. Thank you in advance as we look forward to working together to build a more connected Nigeria. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Gordon. And at this time, I'm going to call on the Executive Head of Legal, Chinwe, to give us the vote of thanks. And while she's speaking, there will be another QR code, believe it or not, for you to give us feedback. We always love to hear how much you enjoyed the event, hopefully, and what you want us to do next time, and if you will join us for our next event. So while she's speaking, please do fill out the feedback form.
Good evening, everyone. So I'm standing in between you and dinner. You can sue me. So, ladies and gentlemen, as we draw this remarkable event to a close, it's my honor to stand here on behalf of the executive management team of ATC Nigeria to thank you all for attending this event. There's a long list of people to thank, but allow me to save time by saying thank you, everyone, our regulators, our customers, our speakers, for being here. We really, really appreciate you all and wish you safe travels to your destinations. So keep connected and have a good dinner. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And just before the music comes on, thank you. I do want to say, as much as we're going to be serving dinner, we do have some information that we would like to share with you about our CSR. Let me go on stage. About our CSR program. We're very proud of the work that we've been doing with our ATC Nigeria Foundation since 2018. So while dinner is served, I do have our COO and one of our visiting execs from our Africa market in South Africa, Suzette Victor. She's the Director of Sustainability. She's here. Can we give her a round of applause? She came all the way for this. Both she and Afalabi Olandujoye, our COO, will come on stage while dinner is served, just to tell you a little bit about our foundation and what we're doing, and more importantly, how you can work with us to make an impact. And you can also find some information about that in our brochure. It's been a pleasure getting us through today's event. We do hope that you've enjoyed it. My name is Adironke Adebanjo, and I work with ATC. I'm the head of comms, and it's been great being here. Please enjoy dinner, and we look forward to having you join us next time. Thank you very much, and have a good evening.
If you feel like a